And we're live. Welcome back to another Corona Geek, here where we talk all about mobile app development using Corona SDK. I'm your host, Charles McKeever, and today we are going to talk about creating custom composer library transitions. That's a mouthful. We've been talking about Composer for this past several weeks. We took a break last week to talk about something else, but we've been kind of focused in on Composer Library and what you can do with it and how to use it and the things that people get hung up on. So we kind of want to round out the conversation with the custom transitions and then maybe do a little bit of housekeeping on some of the topics that we've discussed previously. So joining me today is Ed Marina from roaminggamer.com. Hey Ed, how you doing?
Hey, pretty good.
And it's just you and I today. We're everybody.
Like an echo chamber in here. Just you and I.
You and I. Yeah, I'm assuming that it's 75 degrees and sunny here in Austin. I'm assuming that it's probably the same way someplace else, and that other people are out enjoying the day. So, if they are, I hope they have a good time.
That's got to be it, because it's not 75 and it's not sunny here in Oregon. Let me tell you. We got drenched last night.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a freak week here, but they say keep Austin weird, so that's what we're doing. Last week we talked about on Corona Geek 127. We talked with Jason Schroeder about Progress Ring module and his color picker module. So if you didn't get a chance to go check that out, go to youtube.com/Corona Geek and watch it. We broke it up into segments, so if you want to watch the whole thing from end to end, you can. Or if you want to just watch the pieces a little bit at a time, maybe on the treadmill, maybe in the car. Well, don't watch it in the car. You can listen in the car, that sort of thing. You can do that. And Jason shared a lot of insights into his why he created the modules, how he created the modules, what snafus he had run into, and he also gave us some insights into what's coming next as far as dynamic masking and some of the things that he's also working on in that space. So I thought it was a good conversation all around. If you haven't had a chance to suggest a conversation that we should have, go over to the forums. We'll put a link in the show notes, but there's a thread out there where you can suggest show topics. And I know that some people have been suggesting topics almost weekly, and we appreciate it because we need your suggestions as to what you want to hear about. We've got our latest suggestions were a series on game mechanics. They want us to break it down into like we've done before in the past, and break down a game mechanic into reproducible steps that we can share with everybody. So we're going to do that in some upcoming shows. So if you haven't had a chance, go over to the forums and put your suggestions in the box. We need those so that we can talk about what's important to you.
Right. We need to know what the priorities are for the community.
Yeah, because we can come up with things. We can talk about Composer. We can do whatever, but we need to know what the community is struggling and having issues with, and maybe not even just struggling and have issues. Maybe you're just curious about something. It's something that you haven't done. You want to know about. So it's good stuff. So there is a sale going on right now. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a sale going on over at Crave Creative. Mike over at Crave Creative has created several sets of Corona widget themes, and he is pricing those out at a discount. And right now, if you go over to cravecreative.com and click on the developer resources, you can see those widget themes, and you would save $5 if you were to purchase now, which is great because saving money is a good thing. And he's got lots of graphics already created. The themes are already worked out. Everything that you need is basically available when you purchase it. You get it. You can look at how he did it. If you want to try to create some of your own in the future, or if you need an example, or if you just want to kind of get it and go, you don't really want to mess with that stuff yourself. He's already done the work for you. So go check it out over at cravecreative.com. And thanks, Mike, for giving us a discount. Did you see Were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Oh, your face was...
Well, we're going to do... there's still announcements, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead. Did I see the...
Did you see the 64-bit compatibility blog post?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Did you see that it was updated?
I saw, the blog post, right. That may have been updated subsequently, but...
Yeah, it's been updated. There's a public beta build out there that you can grab that has the 64-bit support for it in it. And if you don't know what we're talking about, basically Apple is saying, look, as of February 1st, your apps, any new apps that are submitted have to have 64-bit compatibility, meaning basically they got better, bigger and better hardware, and they want to be able to let that, what do they call it? Let the dogs run. They want to let the dogs run. And so, and so
I'm a little curious about why they're going this way, but
well, I'm sure it's they're moving that direction, right? Everything it's natural. It's been a natural progression in desktop computers. I don't know why it wouldn't be a natural progression in mobile.
No, it's a natural progression in desktop computers for one reason I can definitely say, which is you need more memory, addressable space. So 32 bits limited you to 4 gigabytes of memory, and that was it. I mean, there were tricks to get beyond that, but you needed more than 32 bits to get more memory, and now people typically have, like my platform here is 6 gigs of memory, and it's not uncommon for people to have 32 gigs of memory, and so it was just a question of addressability. But when we're talking about mobile platforms, we're still talking 1 or 2 gigs of memory max. Now, I mean, that doesn't cover the entire space. There's other things they do when they virtual memory locations, but I'm still curious why 64-bit. I know that there's also some performance questions, or not questions, but 64-bit allows you to do some interesting performance optimizations and changes and modifications. So that's my guess, is that to open up their memory space and to enable them to do more optimizations on the way they deal with data.
Yeah, and they introduced metal, and they're trying to get down to the bare metal on things, and just perform faster and faster. So anyway, what it means to the developers is that if you're submitting any new apps, you have to be compliant by February 1st, which is already passed. Or if you have an existing app, then you have to be, the way that they worded it, it sounds like they have they're going to give it a little bit of wiggle room. But basically, June 1st is the line in the sand to say if you have existing apps, you need to have this 64-bit compatibility. So in order to play ball and make sure everybody's happy, Corona has provided that as well. So there's a beta build out there. Go check it out. We'll put a link in the show notes to the blog post, and then you can do your thing if you need to do your thing. If you don't need to do your thing, don't do your thing. But
as a bit of motivation to people to use it. Now this just may have been circumstantial, but my sense is that Apple is still having problems with people submitting only 32-bit binaries. And a company that I'm working with, I made sure that they used the new one for 64-bit, 32-bit combined, and the submission flew through the App Store. As far as it was 2 days, less than 2 days.
Interesting.
Which is, I've never seen an app go through that fast before. So I think I'm guessing for the fact that our warning, the 64-bit warning, was not there, that they said, well, these guys must know what they're doing. Through the App Store.
Oh, I see. Yeah, if you have a big old stack of things you have to get to, you're sort of like next. Okay, go.
They might be using it as a priority, ordering, selection, choice, option, whatever.
Well, there you go. That would be interesting. Worth testing out. Let's know.
So I'd like to hear other people's experience on that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Well, moving on. Let's announce this month's Corona Geek games that we're playing. Last month we played. What did we play last month? Do you remember? I flushed January.
I remember right now. Yes, that's right. Pick on the sick guy.
Yeah, I flushed January. It's over. But I do know that Greg Pugh was our winner for the month, and that so now we are going to play Crossy Game. So a Crossy Game, Crossy Road.
Crossy Road. Right.
Crossy Game's a whole different game. Don't look that one up. We're gonna play Crossy Road. It's been suggested by Tyler McCraw, so thanks Tyler. And it has a high score component, similar to sort of the Flappy Bird scoring system, but it has a high score component to it, and it's also available on iOS and Android, which also includes even the Amazon platform. So it gives us a lot of options to choose from. So it's not a Corona app. Some people have asked that, is it made with Corona SDK? And no, it's not, but that's fine. We just want to play some games, have some fun, and Crossy Road, if you haven't played it already, it's fun. It's definitely very fun. And I think they've implemented, if you look at take this up as an opportunity to look at how they've implemented their monetization system as well, because I think they've done a pretty good job of including rewards for people, in-game rewards for people by interacting with advertisements. So it's an interesting model to take note of.
I find it interesting that we're doing a non-Corona game. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just interesting to me.
Yeah. Well,
it's motivation to people out there to get some more games in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and realize also, the universe for Corona has gotten a little bigger, because now with Fuse, acquiring Corona, that means Fuse is a platform for monetizing apps for developers. So, it's definitely something we want to have a conversation with all developers, and then especially Corona developers, but also developers of other platforms as well. So we'll probably be reaching out and doing more of these types of things as we go forward. But I think again, it's fun just to have fun, and the game is fun, and if we can do that and everybody can have a good time, then we're good.
Not to sound like a downer, but what you said there is the learning experience too, is to garner, because it was a successful game. It hit the top of the charts, did well, and so why and how did it do that? So people can play the game to win the prize, but to also examine it, as you said, and learn something from what they did that made them successful.
Well, and I've heard several times people have related it to to Frogger, the original classic Frogger game, which kind of flies in the face of the fact that a lot of game mechanics are repeated. The game mechanic is repeated, and it's the idea that's applied to it, or the story that's being told, that is the unique piece of it. Not the game mechanic itself, but the overlay, and I think that Crossy Road has done a good job of creating a new virtual world, even though it's still kind of the same game mechanic. They've done a good job of introducing characters to it and giving it a feel that is unique, and I think that's something to take away from as well, just to look at what they're doing and see be inspired by that.
Yeah, there's a limited number of mechanics under the sun. People reuse them and twist them and sort of reflavor them, but
yeah, even my most favorite games that have come across in the past year or so, I'm like, oh, okay, well this mechanic has already been done a zillion times, but I liked the story that you're telling here. I like the characters. I feel connected to the characters in some way that they've come up with. Whether it's because they're silly little characters, or they're cartoonish, or they're goofy, or I can think of one in particular, which is Dig Away, which is they put a link in the forums to say they wanted beta testers, and it's kind of a puzzle game, and your controls are sort of limited to left, right, and down, because it's your character digs its way through this maze and then winds up, gravity just pulls it down to the next level. But the way that they've animated everything, the way that the different blocks, when the character stands on the different blocks, it has a tactile sort of feedback where the block changes shape because now someone's standing on it. Those types of things I find to be the fine-tuned elements that endear me to the game, even though the mechanic itself is already been done a million times.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it adopts some. I take it you were on the beta testing list.
Yeah, and I've been playing it like crazy. I love it.
As was I. So, yeah, I was inspired, and I thought it was good. I like the way. I won't say too much about the game because got to leave something, some cat in the bag for people later. But I like the way they built up the mechanics in their game. They took a standard mechanic that we'd seen before, and then they started to build up on it with motivations and modifications on the mechanic, and I like that.
Yeah. You got to leave some cat in the bag, people.
Yeah, you got to leave some cat in the bag. I don't think anybody's ever said that before, but
that is a T-shirt right there. Got to leave some cat in the bag. All right. Before I think you said you were going to say something. I think we're done with announcements. So what did you?
Yeah.
What did you want?
So we're going to talk about Composer scene transitions, but before we do, I just wanted to take a moment to not announce, but mention, and we'll put a link to it in the show. Friday, I was starting to get sick, and I was kind of down, so I was just going through the forums and trying to answer questions and stuff, and I answered a question in the forums, and I think I'm going to say because I was not feeling well that I didn't do a good job answering, and so the guy, maybe he thought I was dismissing. I often feel like people think maybe I'm a little dismissive because I'm terse when I respond to their questions, but I wasn't being. So, but feeling bad about it, I said, and I went back and put a little more effort in and gave a solution. And so the question was, he was asking, is there a way to modify the simulator, or could Corona staff modify the simulator so it would please catch these case sensitivity errors that people run into? So new people, old people, everybody who's in the community has done this at least once. And what it is when you're working on your app and you're testing in the simulator, be it OS X or Windows, the simulator is relying upon the operating system, and the operating system is not case sensitive with regards to file names. Uppercase Bob and lowercase Bob .lua, for example, are the same thing to OS X and Windows. However, later on, when you run your game or app on Android or iOS, you will run into a problem if you've gotten the case wrong, because those operating systems are case sensitive. So long story short, people do their work, and everything's tight on the simulator. They go and they export it, and it fails. And it's kind of mysterious because you either don't get good feedback, or if you're new, you don't know how to look at the logs or whatever. Anyways, I answered his question saying that it would be something that would need to be changed in Corona SDK itself. It's not really a simulator problem so much as reliance on the operating system. And then it occurred to me, why don't I just go fix this problem? So I released a module, what I will call a module. It's a one-liner. You can include it in your app as the first line in main.lua. And then optionally, you can write one additional line of code to sort of like turn up the error level if you wish. And what it will do is, if you make a mistake, as the application encounters these mistakes, in case, be it loading a resource file like a PNG, or trying to require a Lua file that has the wrong case, it will print a message through the console, and if you've turned up the error level, it will also pop up a dialog which will tell you the line of code that is doing the, making a mistake. And so people can download this. Like I said, we can include a link after the show. They can include it into their project at any time, from the beginning to the end. It disables itself if it's not run on a simulator, so you can just leave it in there, and it won't interfere with the performance of your application. It does no heavy lifting if it's not running on the simulator. So in a nutshell, the heavy lifting it does is it discovers all of the files in your resource folder, which is basically where your app lives. It then makes a listing of all the possible Lua files and all the possible resource files, and then it does I make a change to the display library, to the graphics library, and a couple of other libraries, or what you might think of as modules in Corona, to do additional checking to verify that the file name that is passed into the function is in one of those two lists. And if it's not found in one of those two lists, it points it out.
Okay, so our first takeaway there, I guess, is there are case sensitivity differences between platforms, Windows, Linux, whatever. And then the second is that if you want something that will help you ferret those out and make it easier to track them down, then you can use this module.
And the third point is for people who have been in the community for a while, like myself, instead of always answering the forums and saying, yeah, that's a known problem, just don't do it, which is basically what I did, is consider helping the person and saying, you know, I know how to solve that problem. So I know it takes time, but there are problems, not problems, I won't even call them problems. There are facets, behaviors of Corona, which are, they're too low on the radar for the staff to deal with, this is one of them. They could fix this, but it would take time, changes to Corona SDK. It would introduce the possibility of creating new bugs in the system. So they got bigger issues. They got to deal with new features, advertising, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. People like myself, other people in the community, like Sergey, we can fix some of these things easily for community members, and so we should do that.
Yeah, well, good job. Thank you very much. That's excellent. And that they can find that where?
They can find it on my GitHub account, and under my, I have a GitHub, what do you call it, repository called RG Free Stuff, which is where I put a lot of my things.
Okay.
And under there is a subfolder called Ask Ed. It's in the 2015 folder under there. I mean, it's kind of deep. I'll give you the direct link.
Yeah.
But people should just find the Roaming Gamer GitHub repositories, and you can find all kinds of goodies. I've got lots of different answers for different forum questions, and I oftentimes will put things in there when I'm working on an idea and didn't quite finish it, like a mechanics concept or something, and I just figured people might find it interesting, so I release it there.
Well, there you go. We will definitely put a link in the show notes directly to it, so if you're looking for that specifically, you can click on it and go right to it. But if you are over there, check out the rest of what Ed has going on. Like he just said, he's got a bunch of stuff. I know that there's a lot of things out there from previous Corona Geeks, a lot of conversations that we've had, a lot of code snippets, a lot of nuggets, a lot of gold in them there hills. So go grab everything that he's got out there while you can.
Yeah, while you can, because I'm going to reorganize it. You know, I admire the guys. I don't know if you've seen the Glitch Games GitHub repository.
Mm-hmm.
But they did a great job of organizing their repository so that it was focused on specific little snippets, solutions, libraries, examples, etc. And I would like to follow their example, but I just haven't had time to reorganize myself.
Yeah, do you know if they refactored that and redid it, or if they were just sort of had a forethought to organize it that way?
No, I think they were organized from the beginning. I think what they ended up doing was they started off with a private. This is my guess. It started off private, and it was like inside documentation, and then they said, you know, we could release this, and so they made some of these things public.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I've seen sessions where they are doing planning for their games, and they'll put a bunch of stickies up on the wall and organize the flow of it and get their ideas down before they even go to code. So I think that's just
Graham's very organized.
Yeah, I think that's their nature, just to sort of get it all planned out and then go to code, which is really the way that it should be, right? Because then then the code just becomes a mechanical portion of the process, not trying to build and create at the same time.
Yeah, I'm not as organized as them. I have an avalanche of things that I want to do, and I limited attention span and time to do it, so I just sort of like spew things out there.
I tell you something I want to start doing is some of these, what do they call them, gists or gists, or what's the
yeah.
I want to start doing some more of that kind of stuff.
With the gists or whatever, right? It's the GitHub like a
snippets
notes kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's less than an entire repository. It's just one file.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is the gists are not as well searchable, findable,
mm-hmm.
as the GitHub entries on their Git. So I always have trouble remembering where the Git is. What I wish they would do is link GitHub search with their gists or gists or whatever they're calling them, because it just, I know that there's like a solution. Like Sergey uses this stuff extensively.
Yeah.
But I always forget where to find it. I know how to get to GitHub, but I can't remember the other one. I don't remember the other link.
Yeah, my thing is, my thing is I just want to get into doing recording more snippets. Be capturing and recording more pieces of code, and instead of having to have a whole solution, a whole project tied to it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Hey, you forgot to mention. Oops, I'm messing up my desktop right before I start showing stuff. But before we start the scene transitions, custom that is, I think I finally got a reason to update to Yosemite. Did you see that blog post on recording?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so I use, shoot, I can't remember what I call it now. I use Air Server, and you use something else. Can't remember what it is.
Yeah.
The Mac variant of, the top Mac choice for that. But with Yosemite now, you can, if you've got Yosemite running on OS 10, or you're using 10.10, well, okay, now I'm getting confused. If you're using the Yosemite version of OS 10, now you can literally just plug your iPad or your iPhone into your device with your Lightning cable and record right off the device, which makes doing demo videos awesome.
Yeah, because it cuts down on a lot of the overhead of having to edit.
And you get it's a better response time than sending it over your local network.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll put a link in the show notes to that blog post as well, because if you hadn't had a chance to check it out, you might not know what we're talking about, but it's worth giving a read.
Yeah.
Still doesn't help the Windows guys.
No, it doesn't help the Windows guys. So if you're Windows, you're going to have to use Air Server like me. But since I have a Mac, I'm going to start doing most of my early recording before I edit it on the Mac.
So there's Air Server, there's what we just talked about in Yosemite, and then I use Reflector,
Reflector, yes.
Reflector actually has a recording feature directly in it as well, so you can
capture. Air Server does too. Yeah. I just generally don't use it.
Yeah, me too. I use a ScreenFlow or some other desktop recording.
Because I'm used to using. It's part of my the way I'm used to doing my work.
Yeah.
So it's like a screencasting kind of recorder.
Well, Reflector will record and output an MP4 or something like that, but then you have to bring it into an external editor anyway. So if I record it in ScreenFlow, then I can record and then I can edit right it all in the same app. And like you say, for workflow purposes, I already know how to use it, so it makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, for people who are used to doing sort of like larger scale or more intense editing, getting the high definition file from Air Server is probably better, but I'm kind of not as sophisticated when it comes to recording. I like to do it all in one fell swoop, so I just do a screencast of my screen and a capture of whatever I'm looking at, sort of like we're going to do today with this example.
Cool.
Not as sophisticated. All right, so enough jibber jabber on my part. If you're ready, I'm ready. I'm going to launch into this. Let me share my screen.
Yeah, let's do it. So we're going to talk about creating custom composer transitions.
Yeah. So so a while back, I was working for a client, and how to put this into context. So first of all, what a scene transition is. A scene transition is a piece of code, a piece of functionality that allows you to control how one scene changes to the next scene. For example, you can see my screen here?
I can.
Okay, so if I push, let me reload this first. If I push scene 2, the button, what it's going to do is going to transition over to scene 2. So as we see here, scene 2 kind of slides in from the bottom. So that's what we're calling, that is what is a scene transition. So Composer comes with like, I don't know, I want to say about 20, the number could be wrong, about 20 different transitions. From the left, from the right, over the top, under the bottom, swizzly one that twirls around. But, it's great. They did, the guys, the staff, maybe the guys and gals, I don't know. The staff did a great job. They came up with a good list of standard transition and some interesting other transitions. But I think that they realized that we're never going to be able to make all the transitions people want. And so as I was alluding to, I was working for a client, and they said, I really like this transition, but except for this one part where it does this thing, and I'd really rather have come over the top or something like that. I'm like, well, I don't know. That transition doesn't exist. It's not in the list. And then, fortunately for me, there was a blog post, and I can't remember the guy who does it, but he does these blog posts where he'll read the blogs and he'll post 3 interesting topics from the forum.
Yeah, Alex.
Alex, yeah. And so Alex did a post, and I was reading through it, and I said, oh, number 2 or whatever, number 3. Custom transitions. And so I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So in a nutshell, what Corona lets you do is it lets you either hand code your own transition. So what I'm showing you here is what a transition hand coded will look like. Or if you're lazy like me, or if you just want to change like one little bit, I always say I'm lazy, but you can duplicate an existing transition, which is what I've done here. And I'll discuss the code a little more deeply in a moment. But on this line here, what I've done is I've taken and made a copy of the from bottom effect, and then I make some changes here to modify the way it behaves. And basically I've got a new effect that is from bottom, but with my own little personal twists.
Nice.
So, but the cool thing about this is that you can really go to town the more you understand how these things work. And on that, there is no, as far as I know, there's no documentation on this. This is one of those kind of things where somebody said, hey, I wonder if I could look at the effects list. So what they did was they said, okay, what's composer library gun in? And they did a 4kV iteration over it, which is pairs. So they iterated over the library, and they printed out everything they could find in it. And then they found this. They found this. This is my guess is how it went. They said, effects list. And then they said, well, that's a table. And so then they dumped out the contents of the table, and then they started reading through it, and they said, what's this seen above, concurrent? And they started to experiment by changing. And at the end of the day, they discovered, hey, I can make my own effects.
That is pretty
just
cool.
for people listening, I want to apologize if my voice gets a bit rough. I'm still sick, so I'm trying to drink tea over here and keep it audible.
Keep things limber.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the blog, the forum post where this conversation came out of?
Yeah. So I tried to be organized when I did this. Let me go to the top here. Wasn't that organized? Okay, yeah. So in one of my files here, I actually have a link to the discussion. Let me bring it up just briefly.
And is that where most of this stuff came out of, or how did you come across? If it's not documented, where did you?
Well,
get this?
like I said, Alex did that post, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I read it, and then his posts always have a link back to the original forum blog. And then Ingemar, who is another person in the forums who answers a lot of questions, an enterprise user, did this whole discussion here. And so I read through it, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And if you read through this here, I'm pretty sure there's a link to another forum post where somebody had been examining Storyboard that also had this ability. So somebody had discovered Storyboard can do it, and then said, well, if we can do it with Storyboard, which is the old scene manager, we should be able to do it with Composer. So unfortunately, I don't have both the links. You know what I'll do is I will dig those out and give them to you so we can post them, because there were 2 different blog posts on this, and there were 2 different threads in the forums that talked about this.
Okay, yeah, those are sound like 2 nuggets that need to be smashed together for sure.
Yeah, so basically what I did was I stole the contents. This particular from forums literally is I took the new effects that they coded up in that forum and verbatim put them in here so we could play with them in our example and see what they do.
I had a science teacher in high school who he said we never stole anything. We liberated it.
Yeah. Well, when I worked at Intel, we had a phrase which was they said steal with pride, and they didn't mean steal. What they meant is learn from what other people have done. Mm-hmm. Grok what they have done, and then make it better.
Yes.
So, and I still do that. I try to do that. I'm always curious about other people's solutions to things and how do they achieve it. So let's go ahead and just try one of these out here. Let me find the code. Excuse me, folks. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so all of these examples, what I'm going to do is, if you look at the example in the Git, you're going to find Hangout 129 under Corona Geek Hangouts, and I'm talking about folder 7, Custom Transitions. Under that folder, and I know it's a little bit hard to read here in the on the screen because I can't make my Explorer text larger real quickly here, but what you want to look at is the scripts file from forums, another one here called Custom Transitions, and then under the IFC folder, which is still under 7 Custom Transitions, I have 2 scenes, scene 1 and 2. And the purpose of these scenes is they're basically the same file. The contents are the same, except one points to scene 1, the other one points to scene 2. So I can just go back and forth and quickly choose different effects to see what they would do.
Gotcha.
Let me run it the way it is now, and then we will make some changes, and I'll show you what some of these things do.
Okay, so all this code will be available. We will link to it in the show notes so you can go get it.
Yeah. So the purpose of this example is to give people a very simple way of testing what the different transitions will look like, without having it all like mashed up in their game. So I like to have like separate test benches.
Yeah.
When I'm experimenting, because then it doesn't get mixed up in the other code that I have to deal with. I don't make mistakes in somebody's project or something. So let me make sure these are all on their standard. So initially what I'm going to use is scene 1 and 2 will use effect called My Effect, and that is created in customtransitions.lua. And I'll just walk you through it. At the top of the file here is an extension to the table library, or table module, however you wish to think of it, called deep copy. And what this does is it will iterate over a table and do its best to duplicate the entire table, even if the table itself has subtables. So you can think of that as like an array of arrays, because it's possible to create a table where some of the entries in the table are actually other tables which have other tables underneath them. And so what this does, as long as you're trying to copy a table that doesn't point back to itself, doesn't iterate back. So for example, you have a table with entry A, and entry A is a table, and entry A has an entry within it that points back to the parent.
Mm-hmm. This
will not work. It'll go into an endless loop.
Okay.
Okay, so anyways, the point of this is the let me find it here, sorry, is that as you saw earlier, these effects are found in composer.effects.list right here, which is a table indexed by the names of the effects. For example, slide left, slide right, or for these custom ones here, iOS slide left. And so what you want to do is either hand code, as I've done in this file, the entire effect on your own, or use deep copy, and then further down here, copy an existing effect. So in this line 56, I'm referencing the from bottom effect. I'm making a deep copy, which will make a complete duplicate of it, and then I'm storing it in a new entry called My Effect. So now the transition list will have fade, crossfade, zoom, yada yada yada, and added to this list will be my, if I can spell, my effect, which I can then use later. I just want to point out that if we look at main.lua, the first line here, I load up the composer library, and then the next 2 lines that execute, all I do is I load up my push button class, which I need, toggle button, and where is it? I am not organized here. What I should have done is loaded up. I should have loaded these in right away. Just to be clear, before you can use them, you need to load them. You only need to do it once. So I should have executed custom transitions and from the forums to make sure that they got loaded. But I think I must have done that in the scene file. Let me take a look. yeah, so at the top of the scene file, before I start to use these transitions, I require scripts custom transitions, which is this file here, which then I'm currently stepping through to show you how to make my effect.
So are you saying that you would have preferred to do it the other way, or what were you saying?
Well, what I could have done is I could have taken this line of code here, as you can see I'm copying it.
Uh-huh.
I could have done it like this, which would have ensured that as soon as the project loaded, because main.lua is the first file that executes,
Gotcha.
that it would load up the composer library, get it into memory, and then immediately build my custom transitions list. This is the safest way to do it, because then from here on I know that I can always access the effect, the transition, my effect, which I'm creating in this file. But I've loaded it in the scene itself before I started to use it, so that's also safe.
Okay.
So again, the key here is you can't use it until you load it.
Gotcha.
Just remember that. So line 50, undo all my changes here. Custom transitions. Okay, so back on line 56, I'm copying from bottom, and I'm going to name it my effect. Now, 58 through 61, you'll see some code commented out where I'm going to make changes, but I haven't done so yet. So let's go ahead and just run this again, see what it looks like, and let's go make those changes. It's kind of subtle. We click it. You can see scene 2 slides in from the bottom, and it slides over the top of scene 1. So well, I could say, well, you know, that's not really what I want. What I'd really rather have is for it to slide underneath the current existing scene. So let's try that. Go to line 60. Let's reference my effect, which I copied just a moment ago. We'll change the scene above parameter and set it to false. I'll reload the project. I'll click scene 2, and what should happen is we'll see nothing. Well, actually, what we'll see is this scene here is, you can't really kind of tell, but it's 50% translucent background, so we should see the content coming underneath. And as you can see there, I'm going to do it a couple times. It's probably a little bit hard to see in the video. People will have to run this on their own, but you can see that it's coming in now underneath.
Interesting.
Undo that. Do it again. Now it's over the top.
And
underneath.
And I'm assuming, I mean, we probably wouldn't do this with normally a 50% translucency on our top layer. So is it we basically preloading something in the background? Is that what we're trying to do?
No. Yeah, I mean, so it kind of defeats the purpose for this transition, because the from bottom is this, what you're getting is this nice effect where you can see it sliding in. That's the whole point of that transition.
Right.
So, but there could be a use. There could be a case where you're like, hey, I want to see it sliding in, and I'm okay making the whole current content of the scene translucent. So let's say maybe what I did was I wanted to see the content sliding in because I had this cool idea for my game or an application. So when I click the button, instead of starting off 50% translucent, at that point I'd put some code in there and say make the background translucent when I click the button, and then you'll be able to see the content slide. So it gives this cool effect, you know.
So this could come down to some kind of visual effect that you're trying to achieve with your.
90% of the time, this comes down to, you know, this is when I work with clients. This is always what happens. The client says, "Yeah, I really like that, but could we make it a little faster? Could we do this thing where I can see it sliding in?" You know, it's all about the aesthetics. And so the takeaway from today's discussion here on custom scene transitions is you, with Composer and Corona, have full access to the list and the attributes, and you can really manipulate the aesthetics of how these things work to get just the effect you want.
Nice. I like that.
So let's go ahead and change concurrent. So concurrent is an attribute. What that says is load the current scene, unload, okay, if it's, I can't remember here. I believe it has to do with unloading the current scene. So I've done it, I've reloaded it, and I think with concurrent false, what this is saying is it's going to unload scene 1 after it gets done with the transition. No, it would be good if you remembered these things before you talk about them. Okay, it's how it loads it. So you can see that there's a difference now in when it draws the content. Okay, yes. Okay, I'm sorry. So backing up, rewind, pretend I didn't make that mistake. Concurrent is saying, if this is true, do the create as you do the transition. If it's false, it's saying do the create before the transition, I believe. So it's a question of the timing of how the scene is created. Now, other people may chime in and say I'm wrong here.
Okay.
The point is you can experiment with these things and see what they do.
Yeah.
The effects that you want.
And you have two attributes of an effect that you're able to manipulate at the same time.
So let me show you the other ones from the forums, just because I thought they were kind of cool. We've got what they called iOS slide left, I guess modeled after some kind of transition they'd seen in iOS. And just a variety of other ones here. So let's go ahead and just run our example. Now I've reset everything, so what we're going to initially see is the from bottom effect, which looks like this, slides over the top of the current scene. But then I could say use slide left instead. This is in scene 1. And load it.
Okay.
I don't know why that's... Oh, iOS slide left, not from. So it's kind of this kind of weird looking to me. It kind of looks weird to me, and it could have something to do with my choice of texture for the background. What it seems to be doing is sliding in at the same time as it sort of slowly slides out the other content.
Yeah.
It gives it this kind of interesting effect. And then we could do go to scene 2, and choose slide right.
Now these effects are things that you've created or things that...
Oh, these are pulled right from the forums entry,
okay.
which I'll give you the link. These were created by Ingemar, I believe.
Okay.
So we go to scene 2, and then we come back, and it does the other way. So those are kind of interesting. Let's change these.
Yeah, almost gives you an effect that they're interacting with each other in some way, like one slide is rubbing on the other slide or something.
Yeah, for my clients, what they're really looking for is this sense of continuity between between the two scenes. Like they're somehow connected to each other, like a page of paper, in a sense, right? Like a physical object. I think the thing with the transitions is they take what we know as a virtual thing that we could display it in any way. We could pop the content in, whatever, fade it in, but it gives it this sense of tactile or tangibility. It makes it feel more real.
Yeah, organic.
Yeah, I don't know how
free
individual
range.
people describe it differently. So
it's free range code.
Free range code. So let's see. Let's do this panel down. Oh, that's about as exciting as it gets. Just to reiterate.
So the point here is that someone would want to go and download the code that you've provided and have a ball with changing the different attributes and figure out what...
Play around.
Yeah.
Another thing I suggest they do is go in here and look at individual effects, and what you can do is you can add a bit of code here at the bottom. And probably what I'll do is I'll just leave it in. I'll leave this in, KV in pairs, and then you say let's choose an effect from the list. Let's choose crossfade. Put this in here. Do say print KV. And I'm going to run this. Sorry, folks. And I'll bring over the console. And what you'll see here is it iterated. Oh, you know what? I made code for this already. What a ding dong. Dump transition effect. I have got a function in here already for people if they want to dump out the contents of the transition. And so they can see what they had before versus what they have now. What I'm doing is I'm iterating over the contents and printing out what's in here.
Okay. That makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
I can't tell you how many times I've done that where you put stuff together ahead of time, and then when you get there, you forgot that you put the stuff ahead of time. So it's a canceling effect.
It seems like a good idea now, and it did then too. I just forgot that I had done it.
Okay, well, awesome. I think this is a great conversation, and I may try to talk with the people who do the. I think Brent, specifically, to see if we can maybe add some documentation around this. This is seems like a good thing.
Just like a little listing of what the instead of me guessing what concurrent means, does somebody really tell me in a nutshell what concurrent is saying?
Yeah, because Brent can go back to the engineers and say, okay, are these all the attributes that we can access, or is there something missing from the list? And that would be good. I think that, especially
exactly. That's it. One of the things that's hard about this is you kind of got to go out there and look at every transition and go, oh, what's that field? Concurrent. Because not all of them use all of the attributes.
Oh yeah, and what does that mean? What does concurrent mean? So
right.
In this context. So, and I think that would be a good thing to do because it's a value add, right? I mean, you've got, like you said, hey, here's a bunch of standard transitions that are out of the box that you can use, but you also have the ability to create your own.
I also suspect that my example here is only scratching the surface on the things that you can do. Sort of as a teaser, there's also the transitions library, and I saw a really cool example the other day where somebody made not a custom transition for the transitions library so much. They did that. But what they did was they realized is they could substitute their own function as a transition. So it wasn't like preset values. It was a function which could then dynamically choose how it behaved at runtime. So I mean, what was really powerful about this was the transition was running, and every time the transition said, I need to update my values, it would call this function instead of just using a fixed set of rules like do a logarithmic or divide it by 2 or ease it over 20% or whatever. It called the function, and the function itself, if you think about it, could be dynamically changing as time goes. So you can get some really funky, interesting transitions. And my guess is that might also apply here. I just haven't cracked the nut on how to do that quite yet.
We're kind of like a dog with 2 short back legs, only scratching the surface.
Thank you. I'm a dog with 2 short back legs. That's wonderful.
Well,
everybody, that's my closer. The dog with 2 short back legs.
I don't want to leave the dog people out. I mean, we we're going to leave half the cat in the bag, so I don't want to.
I could be one of those cats with no fur. All right, yeah.
I didn't hear anything you said prior to that comment because I was just formulating the short dog leg comment. So I'll go back and watch it later, which you should too if you haven't had a chance to see this. And if you're not following along with us real time. Hey, so I think we're going to run out of time.
Yes.
Before we were going to get to unloading modules from memory when working with sprites. Do we have time for that, or is that?
I think so, actually. I'm almost out of voice, but this is such a simple topic.
You're almost out of voice. You have a whole can. You had a whole can of voice, and it's almost gone.
Yeah, that's right. My can of voice is almost gone. All right, so people following along, you're going to find this code on my GitHub under Corona Geek Hangouts, Hangout 129. Under this, you'll find a folder called Composer Scene Manager. And I'm going to talk about now is the subfolder, the project 8, Objects and Modules. Now, Eric Kincaid, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, asked an interesting question. He was having problems managing his sprites in Composer. If I remember correctly, the specific problem he had was making sure that the sprites were managed by Composer in such that they could be removed when he didn't need them, and would be ensured to be on screen when he needed them. So I went and I answered that question, I believe. But as I was answering it, I considered one additional case, and so I just want to point that out to you. So if we're looking here, the one thing I want to point out is that if you're doing a project that uses a lot of sprites, or a lot of, it's only going to be sprites. So you're using a lot of sprites, and you're loading a lot of sprite sheets into memory. Let's say every one of your sprite sheets is 4K by 4K, the maximum size, the big ones. You can only get so many of these loaded into memory on an iPad, let's say 2, as a good example. I think the number you can load into memory is, I want to say 5 or 6 before you run into memory problems, specifically texture memory problems. So you're doing a storybook, you're doing a magazine, you're doing something where you're only going to be showing some of these sprites at any one time. You don't need them all. But as you progress in your story, you load one file, it loads the sprites, you use them, you move on to the next scene, you load some more. If you don't do anything to clean up, what's going to happen is eventually you're going to hit that limit, and you're going to run out of memory, and the app's going to crash, it's going to start acting badly. Something bad is going to happen. So what you need to do is manage the sprites in a module. So you load them up, you initialize them, you do all the stuff you need to get ready to display them and use them. And then later, when you want to clean that folder up, you need to know how to, not that folder, that module, you need to know how to do it. So if you look under folder 8, in the scripts subfolder, there is a file here called sprite module best.lua, which I'll load up. And what I do, hopefully I got this right. Yes. What I do here is I give you a very simple example where the top part can pretty much be ignored. It's just Composer stuff to fit it into this project. On line 12, I create a table called sprite module. And then
we don't
on
see
line
your screen.
54,
We don't see your screen if you're sharing your screen.
oh, you know, that I'm talking to my face here, which is not what we want to do. Okay, backing up. Sprite module best, line 12. I'm starting to create my module. Local sprite module, a table. For people who don't remember, a module is nothing more than a Lua file that contains a table, and then you attach to that table some fields, which may be pointers to function, references to functions, or content of some type, variable names, etc., etc. And then, as the very last line in your file, you return a reference to that table, and then you can require sprite module best. You know, return this table, and then you can reference everything that's in it. It's a way to load it up somewhere else. It'll always stay in memory. All of this stuff that we just created here will always be in memory, and we'll be able to access it off of that reference. This is what you're doing when you do like require JSON. Local JSON equals, let me just type it out so people can see what I'm saying. Local JSON equals require JSON. The first time I do this, what Lua is going to do, it's going to load up the JSON library, it's going to initialize it in memory, store it someplace, and then it's going to return a reference to the table, which is what is created inside this file, and store it in here. And then JSON would have some JSON dot something something function, or JSON something something variable, and I can access it. And that's the concept behind modules. It's very simple, just returning a table. So back to the topic here. We create our module, line 12. Skip over all this other stuff here, which is just prep code for me doing the work. And then I create a module called, a function called init. And what this function does is it creates a options table. It creates a graphics sheet, and I won't go into what these are. You have to know how the sprites work. But people who are familiar with creating sprites know that you need an options sheet, an options table, that is, the sprite sheet itself, and then some options on how it is run, which is Sometimes people call these, I can't remember.
Like the number of frames and where you want to start and all
Yeah,
that kind of stuff like that.
you give names to the animations
Okay.
and how many frames they have and how fast they run. And I'm doing a very, very simple one. One animation that just runs over and over from frame 1 to frame 8 or 9. It takes 1 second to do that, and it just runs forever. So I initialize. You'll notice that I didn't have local here in front, so that means that I've created these higher up, line 20 to 22. I have local variables to store these in. When they get initialized after .init, the function is called. Those will always be present in memory. They'll be stored in memory. So that means if I want to destroy them later, I need to clean them up. So the takeaway from this discussion is that I've created a additional function on this module called destroy. And what it does is it nils out those variables so that they can be garbage collected. We talked about this previously. And then what it does is it will look for the actual module as stored by Lua. And modules are stored in package.loaded, and it will nil that out. It will also nil out the global if it was created. Some modules will also create, for example, the way Corona works is they have a module called display, which is always loaded, and it can be found in the global variable display. So we need to clear that out too. And so it clears out the module as it is loaded in 2 locations, and now Lua is free to garbage collect this. This little tiny piece of code here allows us to subsequently unload all of the work that we did.
Could something like that be modified into a generic function?
Yeah,
that
there's I stole this from a generic solution called unrequire, which is really what this is. Well, this little step here is the opposite of require.
Okay.
But the distinction here is because I knew that the way I packaged and prepped my data, that I also needed to clear these 3 variables. So I think that people will look at this, and if they take their time, they will understand what I am doing and how this can be used to completely clear the module.
Okay.
All right, and so that's pretty much it.
That's it. Okay, so download the code and walk through it and understand what's going on and use it in your projects.
Yep.
There you go. Okay.
I'm sorry, folks. Today I'm kind of out of it with my. I'm getting over a long sickness.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're feeling better, and hopefully you'll get better over the week. And we are done for the day. That's all we have for today. We will put links in the show notes to all the things that we've talked about today. And if you haven't had a chance, do go back and watch the previous Hangouts on Composer. We're going to be putting up a blog post here in the next few days on kind of a summary of all the things that we've talked about, just a kind of a compilation of all the videos together. But you can find all of them over at youtube.com/Corona Geek. We've created snippets of all of them, and they're in playlists, and you can watch them end to end if you want, and all that kind of stuff. So, but check the show notes for each of those. There's code in each of those that you can go and grab and experiment and play with, and Ed's done a great job of kind of giving you that starter pieces, to be able to get your hands on. So, all right.
I want to say, hey, don't forget, you mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but this has been fun. We've been doing Composer here for a few weeks, but it's going to change up now. It's been requested that we do game mechanics, and we're going to start jumping into that. So that should be pretty exciting.
Yeah, great. I'm looking forward to it. I think we should definitely spend some time with that. And you had mentioned earlier that we also had said we were going to cover transitions some time ago when we started the Composer series. So we'll probably mix and match. Maybe during each show we'll do a little bit of transitions and a little bit of game mechanics.
Instead of having a monolithic one-topic show, we should split things up a little bit for people who have different interests.
Yeah. Yeah, and that makes great for the snippets when we bust things out. And then it becomes a snippet about transitions and a snippet about game mechanics and things like that. So it does give a little bit of variety to things. So we'll start that next week, and we'll probably, Ed and I need to hammer out some details, but we'll announce some new things on social media. So if you don't already, follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/Corona Geek, facebook.com/Corona Geek, youtube.com/Corona Geek. If there's if you're on social media someplace, just put /Corona Geek and you can probably find us. And then one last note is just, we are playing Crossy Road. This is if you want a chance to win a $50 gift card, go out there, post your high score, a picture of your high score to the facebook.com/Corona Geek Facebook wall. And on March 2nd, when we announce the winner, hopefully it'll be you. All right. That's it for this week. Have a great week. We'll be back here next Monday at 12 p.m. Pacific talking about mobile app development using Corona SDK. Till then, have a great week and happy coding.